The taste of blood filled Savannah Carter's mouth as she bit down on her lip, refusing to cry out when rough hands pushed her through the mansion's iron gates. Behind her, her stepfather's laughter echoed in the night air, a sound that would haunt her forever. "I trust the payment has been transferred." His voice was casual, as if he hadn't just sold his stepdaughter to a stranger. A tall figure emerged from the shadows of the grand entrance. Even in the dim light, Savannah could see the sharp angles of his face, the cold calculation in his steel-gray eyes. Killian Hawthorne, the billion-dollar devil who'd bought her like a piece of property. "It's done," Killian said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Leave." Savannah lunged forward, a desperate attempt at freedom, but Killian's security caught her arms. "You can't do this," she spat, her voice raw with fury. "I'm not something you can trade." Killian stepped closer, and the air around them seemed to freeze. His presence commanded attention, demanded submission, but Savannah met his gaze with defiance. He studied her face with detached interest, like examining a newly acquired asset. "Your stepfather's debt has been settled," he stated flatly. "You're the collateral. That's all you need to know." "I'll run," Savannah threatened, her heart pounding against her ribcage. "You can't keep me here." A ghost of a smile touched Killian's lips, but it never reached his eyes. "You're welcome to try. But understand this. There's nowhere you can go where I won't find you." The mansion's massive doors opened, revealing a world of marble floors and crystal chandeliers. Savannah's stepfather's footsteps faded into the night, leaving her alone with the monster who'd bought her freedom. "Take her to her room," Killian ordered, already turning away. "Make sure she understands the rules." "Wait," Savannah called out, her voice steady despite her fear. "Why me? What do you want?" Killian paused, his broad shoulders tense under his tailored suit. For a moment, something flickered across his face, an emotion Savannah couldn't name. But when he turned, his expression was carved from stone. "Want? Nothing. You're merely a means to an end, Miss Carter. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be." The security guards led her through winding corridors, but Savannah's mind was already working, cataloging exits, analyzing weaknesses. She'd been trapped before, by her stepfather's greed and her mother's death. She wouldn't be caged again. Her new room was a gilded prison, expensive furnishings, silk sheets, and a view of manicured gardens surrounded by high walls. The guard stationed outside her door was just another reminder of her captivity. Savannah waited until night fell completely, listening to the quiet footsteps in the hallway. Her fingers traced the window's edge, testing its strength. A knock at the door made her jump. Killian entered without waiting for a response. He'd loosened his tie, but his guard was still firmly in place. "I assume you're planning your escape already, wouldn't you?" He approached slowly, like a predator aware of its power. "Let me be clear. You're here because I allow it. You'll stay because I demand it. Fighting this arrangement will only make things worse for you. Why not just kill me?" Savannah challenged. "It would be simpler than keeping me prisoner." Something dangerous flashed in Killian's eyes. "Death would be too easy. Your stepfather needs to learn a lesson about consequences. You're the perfect tool for that lesson." "I'm not your tool," Savannah hissed, stepping closer despite her fear. "And I won't break." Killian's hand shot out, catching her chin. His touch was surprisingly gentle, but his grip was firm. "Everyone breaks, Miss Carter. It's just a matter of finding the right pressure point." He released her and walked to the door, pausing at the threshold. "Rest well. Tomorrow we begin." The door locked behind him, but Savannah's determination only grew stronger. She'd been sold to a man without a soul, but she still had hers. And as long as she had that, she'd never truly be his. Morning light filtered through the windows of Killian Hawthorne's mansion, but it did nothing to warm the rigid atmosphere inside. Savannah stood in his study, her back straight as he circled her like a shark assessing its prey. "These are your boundaries," Killian said, placing a tablet on his mahogany desk. "Your schedule, your permitted areas, your expectations. Follow them." Savannah glanced at the screen, her stomach turning at the military precision of her new life. Every hour was accounted for, controlled, scheduled. "And if I don't, then you'll learn why your stepfather was so eager to make a deal with me." Killian's voice carried no threat, just cold certainty. "Does intimidation work on everyone you meet? Or am I special?" Savannah's words were sharp, calculated to pierce his armor. Killian's eyes narrowed. and for a split second, she saw something flicker behind his controlled facade. "Your attitude is noted, Miss Carter, but it won't serve you here." A knock interrupted them. James, Killian's head of security, entered with a stack of papers. "Sir, the Shanghai merger needs your attention." "Watch her," Killian ordered, taking the documents. His focus shifted entirely to business, as if Savannah had ceased to exist. She seized the opportunity, snatching the tablet from his desk and hurling it against the wall. The screen shattered, pieces scattering across the expensive carpet. The room went deadly quiet. James reached for his weapon, but Killian held up a hand, stopping him. His eyes locked onto Savannah, and for the first time, she saw a crack in his composure, a dangerous glint that made her breath catch. "Leave us," Killian commanded. James hesitated, then withdrew, closing the door behind him. Killian approached Savannah slowly, deliberate steps that made her pulse race. He stopped inches from her, close enough that she could smell his expensive cologne. Impressive display of defiance. "Feel better. I won't be programmed like one of your computers." His hand shot out, gripping her jaw, not enough to hurt, but enough to hold her in place. "You mistake my patience for weakness, Miss Carter." "Don't. And you mistake ownership for control," Savannah countered, refusing to back down despite her racing heart. Something shifted in Killian's expression, a flash of intrigue beneath the ice. His thumb brushed her lower lip, an action so unexpected it made her freeze. "You're different from what I expected," he murmured, almost to himself. Savannah jerked away from his touch. "Sorry to disappoint." On the contrary, Killian returned to his desk, his mask of indifference firmly back in place. "You'll join me for dinner tonight. 7 sharp. Consider it your first test. And if I refuse, then you'll learn that hunger is the least of your concerns." He picked up his phone, dismissing her presence. "James will show you to the dining room. Don't be late." Savannah was escorted back to her room, her mind racing. She'd expected punishment for her outburst, not an invitation to dinner. What game was he playing? As she stood at her window, watching gardeners trim the endless hedges below, a realization struck her. Killian Hawthorne might own her body, but he was fascinated by her spirit. And maybe, just maybe, that fascination was a weapon she could use. She spent the afternoon pacing, analyzing every interaction, every subtle shift in his demeanor. He was a man used to absolute control, yet something about her challenged him. The question was why. At precisely 7, James arrived to escort her to dinner. Savannah followed, her chin high, strategies forming in her mind. Killian Hawthorne might be soulless, but even demons had weaknesses. She just had to find his. The grandfather clock struck midnight as Savannah crept through the darkened hallway. 3 weeks of observation had revealed the guards' rotation patterns, the security camera's blind spots, and most importantly, Killian's late-night routine in his office. She'd memorized every detail, watching the staff, noting when the kitchen door remained unlocked for early morning deliveries. The moon cast long shadows through the windows, providing cover as she moved silently toward the service entrance. A floorboard creaked beneath her feet. Savannah froze, counting heartbeats. 5 seconds. 10. No movement. She continued forward, her shoes in her hand, feet soundless on the cold marble. The kitchen door swung open without resistance. Too easy. The night air carried the scent of rain and freedom as she slipped outside, keeping to the shadows of the hedges. 20 yards to the gate. 15. 10. Going somewhere, Miss Carter? Killian's voice sliced through the darkness. He stepped out from behind a tree, blocking her path. Savannah's heart plummeted, but she refused to show fear. "Just admiring your gardens," she said, backing away slowly. "The night air is particularly refreshing." "Indeed." Killian advanced, matching her retreat step for step. Though most people prefer to admire gardens with their shoes on. Savannah glanced at the shoes in her hand, then threw them at his face. He caught them effortlessly, but the distraction was enough. She bolted, sprinting toward the gate. She made it 3 steps before his arms locked around her waist, lifting her off the ground. Savannah fought, twisting and striking, but Killian's grip was unbreakable. "Let me go." She drove her elbow back, catching his ribs. Killian spun her around, pinning her against the nearest tree. His breath came fast, but his voice remained controlled. "Impressive planning. You almost made it. How did you know?" "I know everything that happens in my house." His face was inches from hers, eyes glinting in the moonlight. Every whisper, every movement, every breath. Rain began to fall, soft drops sliding down their faces. Savannah became acutely aware of his body pressed against hers, the heat of him contrasting with the cool bark at her back. "What now?" she challenged. "Another locked room? More guards?" "No." Killian's grip loosened, but he didn't step back. "Now we make a deal. I don't make deals with captors." "Then consider it a game." Something dark and hungry flickered in his expression. "You want freedom? Earn it. Prove you're clever enough to escape me, and I'll let you go." The security lights suddenly flooded the garden, casting harsh shadows across Killian's face. In the artificial brightness, Savannah caught a glimpse of something in his eyes, a flash of admiration, quickly masked by his usual coldness. "You're lying," she accused, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I never lie, Miss Carter. It's bad for business." His hand moved to her throat, not squeezing, just resting there. "But understand this. If you win, you're free. If I win, you surrender. Completely." Thunder rolled overhead, punctuating his words. Savannah's pulse raced beneath his fingers. "And if I refuse to play? Then you remain exactly what you are now, property." His thumb traced her racing pulse. "At least this way, you have a chance." The rain fell harder, soaking through their clothes. Killian's white shirt turned translucent, revealing the muscled frame beneath. Savannah forced herself to look away. "Fine," she said. "I'll play your game." Killian's lips curved into a predatory smile. "Then let's begin." He stepped back, releasing her. "You have 1 month. Use it wisely." Savannah pushed away from the tree, straightening her spine. "When I win, I want more than freedom. I want everything you took from me." "Ambitious." Killian's eyes traveled over her face, lingering on her lips. "But remember, Miss Carter, I play to win, and I never lose." He turned and walked away, leaving her in the rain. Savannah watched him disappear into the darkness, her body still humming from his touch. She'd agreed to his game, but she'd play by her own rules. 2 guards emerged from the shadows, their presence a reminder of her gilded cage. They flanked her as she walked back to the mansion, but their watchful eyes didn't bother her anymore. Let them watch. Let them report every move to their master. Because what Killian didn't understand was that he'd just given her exactly what she needed: access. Every game had rules, and rules could be bent. Every player had weaknesses, and Killian's was his own arrogance. As she followed the path back to the mansion, Savannah's mind raced with possibilities. 1 month to win her freedom. 1 month to find every crack in Killian Hawthorne's armor. 1 month to turn his game into her weapon. The clock was ticking, and this time, she wouldn't fail. Savannah's fingertips traced the leather spines in Killian's library, her mind processing the interaction she'd witnessed hours earlier. A business associate had visited the mansion, a man with cruel eyes who'd looked at her like she was merchandise. But before he could approach her, Killian had stepped between them, his stance unmistakably protective. Now, alone among the books, she couldn't shake the memory of Killian's reaction. The barely contained violence in his voice when he'd told the man to leave. The way his hand had hovered near the small of her back, not touching, but ready to move her to safety. The library door opened. Killian entered, his tie loosened, jacket discarded. The evening sun cast shadows across his face, highlighting the tension in his jaw. "You shouldn't be here," he said, but made no move to call the guards. Who was he? Savannah kept her voice neutral, testing the waters. "Marcus Reynolds, arms dealer, former associate." Killian poured himself a drink, the amber liquid catching the light. "Stay away from him. I thought I was just property. Why protect your investment?" His glass stopped halfway to his lips. "Is that what you think this is about? Isn't it?" Savannah moved closer, watching his reaction. "Or is there another reason you keep me here, locked away from everyone?" Killian set his glass down with controlled precision. "You're playing a dangerous game, Miss Carter. I learned from the best." She stepped into his space, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. "What are you afraid of, Killian? That someone else might want what you own." His hand shot out, gripping her waist. The touch sent electricity through her veins. "You have no idea what you're dealing with." "Then tell me." Savannah didn't back down, even as his grip tightened. "What's the real reason you bought me?" Something cracked in Killian's expression, a flash of raw emotion that vanished as quickly as it appeared. He released her suddenly, as if burned. Get out. No. Savannah grabbed his wrist, surprising them both. I'm tired of your cryptic warnings. If you want me to stay away from Reynolds, tell me why. Killian's muscles tensed under her fingers. For a moment, she thought he might throw her out. Instead, he exhaled slowly, his mask slipping just enough to reveal exhaustion underneath. Reynolds isn't just an arms dealer. He's a collector of rare commodities. His voice carried an edge of disgust. Women like you, strong, defiant, beautiful, are his favorite acquisitions. He breaks them, piece by piece, until there's nothing left. The word beautiful hung between them, unacknowledged but impossible to ignore. And you're different? Savannah challenged, though her voice had lost its bite. I'm many things, Miss Carter. A monster, perhaps, but I don't break what's. He stopped, jaw clenching. What's yours? She finished, stepping closer. Killian's eyes darkened. Don't what? Remind you that under all this control, you're just as human as I am. His hand found her throat, but the touch was gentle, a warning, not a threat. You think you figured me out? That you can use my humanity against me? No, Savannah whispered, her heart racing. I think you're using my captivity to hide from something. Something about me terrifies you. Killian Hawthorne. The sound of his name on her lips made him flinch. His fingers traced her pulse point, a touch so light it might have been imagination. You want to know what terrifies me? His voice was rough. The way you look at me like you can see past every wall I've built. The fact that despite everything, you're still here, fighting, challenging, refusing to break. Savannah's breath caught. Then let me go. I can't. The words seemed torn from him. Not until it's finished. Until what's finished? Killian stepped back, his mask sliding back into place. Your month isn't up, Miss Carter. Keep playing the game. Maybe you'll figure it out. He turned to leave, but paused at the door. Stay away from Reynolds. Please. The please lingered in the air long after he'd gone. Savannah sank into a leather armchair, her mind spinning. She'd come to the library looking for weaknesses, for ammunition to use against him. Instead, she'd found fragments of a man fighting his own demons. As night fell over the mansion, Savannah stared out the library window, watching lightning flicker in the distance. Somewhere in this twisted game of power and control, the lines had begun to blur. Killian Hawthorne was supposed to be her enemy, her captor, the monster she needed to escape. So why did his touch still burn on her skin? Why did his rare moments of vulnerability make her heart race more than his threats? And most dangerous of all, why did she find herself wanting to unlock the mystery behind his carefully constructed walls? The game was changing, evolving into something neither of them had anticipated. And Savannah wasn't sure if she was winning or losing anymore. The chandelier cast golden light across the dining room as Savannah sat among New York's elite, watching Killian work the crowd. Tonight's dinner party gathered the city's most powerful business figures, each hiding darkness behind designer suits and practiced smiles. Miss Carter. The voice came from her left, Andrew Morrison, a hedge fund manager whose eyes never quite met hers. How did you come to know our host? Before she could answer, another guest leaned in. Yes, do tell. Killian's never brought a woman to these gatherings. Savannah felt the weight of their curiosity, the underlying hunger for gossip. She caught Killian watching from across the room, his expression unreadable. Mr. Hawthorne and I have a business arrangement, she said carefully, taking a sip of wine. A third man joined their circle, older, with silver hair and a politician's smile. Senator Williams, she recalled from the introductions. Business arrangement? That's not what I heard. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Killian appeared at her side, his hand settling possessively on her shoulder. Senator, I trust you're not making my guest uncomfortable. Not at all. Just curious about your investment. The senator's smile didn't reach his eyes, especially given your history with Carter Industries. Savannah's glass froze halfway to her lips. Carter Industries, her mother's company before the accident, before her stepfather took control. Killian's fingers tightened imperceptibly on her shoulder. The past is the past, Senator. Shall we discuss the energy bill instead? But Savannah's mind was racing. She'd assumed her captivity was about her stepfather's debts, but this was the second time someone had hinted at a deeper connection. The evening progressed like a chess match. Savannah watched Killian navigate conversations, noting how he deflected certain topics, particularly anything involving events from 5 years ago when her mother died. As servers cleared the dessert plates, a new guest arrived. Marcus Reynolds entered the dining room like he owned it, his presence drawing all eyes. Killian's posture stiffened. "Hope I'm not too late for the party." Reynolds smiled, but his gaze fixed on Savannah with predatory interest. "You weren't invited." Killian's voice carried lethal warning. Reynolds ignored him, approaching Savannah's chair. "Miss Carter, you look exactly like your mother." The room went silent. Savannah's heart pounded as Reynolds reached for her hand. Before he could touch her, Killian moved, fast and deadly, grabbing Reynolds' wrist. "Outside. Now." Killian's command left no room for argument. The two men disappeared into the hallway. Conversation resumed, but Savannah noticed guards positioning themselves near the exits. Something was wrong. She slipped away from the table, following the sound of raised voices to Killian's study. The door was ajar. "You're playing a dangerous game," Reynolds was saying. "Does she know what really happened that night? Touch her again, and I'll end you." Killian's voice was barely human. Reynolds laughed. "You think you can protect her? When she finds out what you did, dash." A crash interrupted him. Savannah pictured Killian's hands around Reynolds' throat, remembered the violence that always simmered beneath his controlled exterior. "The accident wasn't your fault," Reynolds continued, his voice strained but taunting. "But what came after? The cover-up? Does sweet Savannah know her mother's death bought your empire?" Savannah's world tilted. She stumbled back from the door, bumping into a side table. The vase crashed to the floor. The study door flew open. Killian stood there, his knuckles bloody, his composure shattered. Their eyes met, and for the first time, she saw real fear in his face. "Savannah, dash." She ran. Through the corridors, past startled guests, out into the garden. The night air couldn't ease the tightness in her chest. Her mother's death, Killian's empire, her captivity, pieces of a puzzle she couldn't bear to solve. Footsteps approached behind her. "Let me explain," Killian said softly. "Explain what?" Savannah turned, fury and grief warring in her voice. "How my mother's death connected to your rise to power. How you bought me to, what? Ease your conscience. It's not that simple." "Then make it simple." She advanced on him, fists clenched. "What did Reynolds mean? What did you do?" Killian caught her wrists as she struck his chest. "Your mother's death was an accident." "But what followed?" He released her, running a hand through his hair. "There are people who would kill to keep those secrets buried. And I'm what? Collateral damage. You're the only thing that matters." The words exploded from him, raw and unexpected. Killian stepped back, visibly struggling for control. "Your stepfather was going to sell you to Reynolds. I couldn't. I wouldn't let that happen." "Why? Because you owe my mother?" "Because I dash." He stopped, jaw clenched. "Because Reynolds destroys everything he touches. And you deserve better than that fate." Savannah studied his face, searching for lies. "There's more you're not telling me." "Yes." Killian's honesty surprised her. "But knowing would put you in danger." "Real danger, Savannah. Not this game we've been playing." She laughed bitterly. "You think this is a game to me? My mother is dead. My life is in shambles. And you're keeping me prisoner to protect me from secrets I don't even know?" "Yes." He stepped closer, his expression intense. "Until I can dismantle the people behind it all, you're safer here. With me. Safe." Savannah gestured to the mansion, the guards, the gilded cage he'd built. "This isn't safety, Killian. This is control." His eyes darkened. "Maybe, but you're alive. And as long as you're here, you'll stay that way." The party continued inside, oblivious to the storm raging in the garden. Savannah wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold. "I want the truth," she said finally. "All of it. You'll have it. When it's safe." Killian moved to touch her face, then dropped his hand. "For now, trust that everything I've done, everything I'm doing, is to protect you." Savannah met his gaze, seeing the war behind his eyes, the need to keep his secrets versus the desire to give her answers. For the first time, she wondered if her captivity was protecting her from something far worse than Killian Hawthorne. 3 days after the dinner party, tension saturated every corner of the mansion. Savannah prowled the halls like a caged animal, while Killian buried himself in his office, emerging only for urgent business calls. The morning started with another argument. Savannah had demanded access to her mother's old files, and Killian's refusal sparked an explosive confrontation in his study. You can't keep hiding the truth, she said, slamming her hands on his desk. I deserve to know what happened to my mother. Killian didn't look up from his laptop. We've discussed this. No, you've dismissed this. Repeatedly. Savannah reached over and closed his laptop. Look at me when you're denying me answers about my own mother's death. His eyes met hers, cold fury simmering beneath the surface. You're testing my patience. And you're testing my sanity. She leaned closer, invading his space. Reynolds knew things. About you, about the accident. What? Killian stood abruptly, his chair scraping against hardwood. Drop it, Savannah. Or what? She circled the desk, following as he retreated. You'll lock me in my room? Add more guards? What's left in your arsenal of control? I'm trying to protect you. From what? Her voice rose. The truth? That you somehow profited from my mother's death? That all this, she gestured to the mansion around them, was built on her grave. Killian moved fast, backing her against the wall. You have no idea what you're talking about. Then enlighten me. Savannah tilted her chin up, defiant. What are you so afraid I'll discover? Everything. The word exploded from him. The accident, the company takeover, your stepfather's involvement. It's all connected. And the people behind it won't hesitate to silence anyone who knows too much. Including you? Something flickered in his eyes. I made choices. Terrible ones. But everything I've done since that night has been to keep you safe. I never asked for your protection. No. His voice softened dangerously. But you have it, whether you want it or not. Savannah pushed against his chest. I don't want anything from you. Liar. Killian caught her wrist, his touch sending electricity through her veins. You want answers. Justice. Revenge. I see it in your eyes every time you look at me. You don't know what I want. Don't I? His free hand slid to her neck, thumb tracing her racing pulse. Your heart says otherwise. The air between them crackled with tension. Savannah knew she should pull away, maintain the anger that had driven her all morning. Instead, she found herself mesmerized by the war in his eyes. Control versus desire, duty versus need. Let me go, she whispered, but there was no conviction in her voice. Killian's response was to kiss her. Not gentle, not asking permission, but desperate, consuming, like a man breaking every rule he'd set for himself. His hands tangled in her hair as he pressed her against the wall, and Savannah responded with equal fury, pouring months of frustration and confusion into the kiss. She bit his lower lip, hard enough to draw blood. Killian growled, lifting her off her feet. Her legs wrapped around his waist as he carried her to his desk, scattering papers and files. The kiss deepened, changed. Beneath the anger and passion, something else emerged, a tenderness that frightened them both. Killian's hands gentled, one cupping her face while the other supported her back. Savannah felt the shift, the moment when possession became protection. Reality crashed back like a bucket of ice water. Killian jerked away, his breathing ragged. Savannah remained on his desk, watching as he fought for control. This can't happen, he said finally, his voice raw. It just did. Savannah touched her bruised lips. Why did you stop? Killian turned away, hands gripping the back of his chair. Because I won't be another person who takes advantage of you. Is that what you think this is? You're my prisoner, Savannah. Bitterness laced his words. Whatever this is, it can't be real. Not while I hold all the power. She slid off the desk, straightening her clothes. You're wrong. This, she gestured between them, is the only real thing in this entire twisted situation. It doesn't matter. Killian's mask slipped back into place. It won't happen again. More rules. Savannah approached him slowly. More control? When will you realize you can't control everything, Killian? Not your empire, not your secrets, and certainly not what's happening between us. He remained silent, but she saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands clenched and unclenched. Tell me something, she continued. When you kissed me, was it to shut me up? To prove your power? Or because you couldn't help yourself? Killian turned, his expression dangerous. Get out. No. Savannah stepped closer. Answer me. For once, be honest about something. His control snapped. In 2 strides, he had her pinned against the wall again. But this time, he didn't kiss her. Instead, he pressed his forehead to hers, eyes closed, breathing uneven. I can't want you, he whispered. Not with everything at stake. Not with what's coming. Savannah touched his face, feeling him flinch at the gentleness. What's coming, Killian? What are you so afraid of? He pulled away, the vulnerability vanishing. James will escort you to your room. Stay there until I call for you. Running away again? Killian reached the door, pausing with his hand on the handle. No, Savannah. I'm trying to run toward something. I just hope I reach it before it's too late. The door closed behind him, leaving Savannah alone with the ghost of his kiss and more questions than ever. But one thing was certain. Whatever game they'd been playing had just changed irrevocably, and neither of them knew the rules anymore. Savannah seized her chance during a thunderstorm that knocked out the mansion's power. Emergency generators hummed to life, but for 3 crucial minutes, the security system reset. 3 minutes where every electronic lock disengaged. She slipped into Killian's study like a shadow, heart pounding against her ribs. The backup lights cast an eerie blue glow across the room. His laptop would be locked, but she'd watched him enough times to know he kept important documents in the antique safe behind his father's portrait. The combination took seconds, his empire's founding date, something she'd glimpsed in a newspaper article about him. Inside, she found stacks of folders, each labeled with precise handwriting. A file marked Carter Holdings caught her eye. Hands trembling, she pulled it out and began to read. The first page was an acquisition contract, dated 1 week after her mother's death. But it was the second document that made her blood run cold, a detailed report about her mother's car accident. Mechanical failure, the official story claimed. Yet here was proof of tampering, of deliberate sabotage. Thunder cracked outside as she dug deeper. A third document revealed the truth that shattered everything. Her sale contract. But it wasn't just about her stepfather's debt. The contract laid out a complex web of connections. Her mother's company, offshore accounts, and a shadow organization that had orchestrated it all. Her stepfather hadn't sold her to Killian. He'd sold her to someone far worse. Killian had outbid them, using his fortune to intercept the sale. The study door opened. Savannah spun around, papers clutched to her chest, to find James in the doorway. His face was grim. "Miss Carter," he said, reaching for his weapon. "Step away from the safe." "Where's Killian?" "Out. Which is why I can't let you leave with those documents." James advanced slowly. "Put them back, and we'll forget this happened." Savannah backed toward the window. "They killed her. My mother. They made it look like an accident. You don't understand what you're dealing with." James's expression softened slightly. "Mr. Hawthorne has been trying to protect you. By keeping me prisoner? By hiding the truth? By keeping you alive?" James lowered his gun slightly. "The people who killed your mother, they've been watching. Waiting. Mr. Hawthorne bought you to keep you safe from them." A shadow moved behind James. Savannah opened her mouth to warn him, but it was too late. Something heavy struck his head, and he crumpled to the floor. A man in black tactical gear stepped over James's body, followed by 2 more. Their faces were covered, but their movements were professional, lethal. "Target acquired," the first man said into a radio. Proceeding with extraction. Savannah threw the nearest object, a heavy paperweight, at the leader's head. He dodged, but it gave her enough time to bolt for the door. A hand caught her arm, spinning her around. "The boss wants her alive," one man growled. "Don't damage the merchandise." She fought like a wild animal, using every self-defense move she'd learned. But they were trained professionals. A cloth pressed over her mouth and nose. The world began to blur. Her last conscious thought was of Killian. He'd known this might happen, had tried to prevent it. And now, gunshots exploded through the study. The man holding Savannah jerked, his grip loosening. Through fading vision, she saw Killian in the doorway, fury incarnate. He moved with deadly precision, each shot finding its mark. But there were more attackers in the hallway. As darkness claimed her, Savannah heard Killian shouting her name. Then nothing. She woke to chaos. The mansion's security team was everywhere, securing the scene. James sat nearby, holding an ice pack to his head. And Killian knelt beside her couch, his knuckles bloodied, his expensive suit torn. When he saw her eyes open, relief cracked his usual mask. "You stupid, reckless woman," he breathed, touching her face. "What were you thinking?" Savannah tried to sit up, but the room spun. "They killed my mother." "I know." His voice was gentle. "I've been building a case against them for 5 years. Gathering evidence, tracking money trails, waiting for them to make a mistake." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because knowledge makes you a target." Killian's hand slipped to her neck, checking her pulse. "They've been watching you since the accident, waiting for the right moment. Your stepfather's debt was their opportunity. So you bought me first. The pieces finally fit. But why? Why risk everything to protect me? Killian was quiet for a long moment. Your mother saved my life once. She offered me a job when everyone else saw a lost cause. Everything I built, I owed to her belief in me. And now, his eyes met hers, raw with emotion he usually kept buried. Now it's more than duty. You know that. Before she could respond, James approached with a tablet. Sir, we've identified the attackers. They're connected to the Valencia cartel. Killian's expression hardened. Of course, Reynolds' partners. They'll try again, Savannah said quietly. Yes. Killian stood, his walls rebuilding. Which is why we're leaving. James, initiate protocol echo. Full evacuation, no electronic trail. You're running? We're regrouping. Killian offered his hand, helping her up. The game has changed, Savannah. They know you've seen the files. We need to disappear until I can deal with them permanently. We? She raised an eyebrow. I thought I was just property. His thumb brushed her lower lip, remembering their kiss. You've never been just anything. Security teams moved with practiced efficiency, preparing for evacuation. Savannah watched Killian issue orders, seeing him in a new light. He wasn't her captor anymore. He was her shield against something far darker. But as she touched the documents hidden in her pocket, she knew this was just the beginning. The truth about her mother's death was still out there, along with the people responsible. And now she had a choice to make. Trust Killian and his protection, or use this chaos to finally break free. The storm raged on outside, matching the turmoil in her heart. Freedom had been her goal for so long. But freedom to what? To run alone while killers hunted her? Or to stay with the man who'd risked everything to keep her safe? Thunder shook the windows, and Savannah made her decision. Savannah watched Manhattan's skyline fade through the helicopter's window. Beside her, Killian worked on his laptop, coordinating their escape through encrypted channels. The events of the past 12 hours felt surreal. The attack, the evacuation, the truth about her mother's death. Where are we going? She asked, breaking the tense silence. My compound in Montana. Killian didn't look up. Remote, defensible, off any official radar. The helicopter banked sharply, following a path designed to throw off potential pursuit. Savannah's head throbbed where she'd hit it during the fight. The stolen documents felt heavy in her jacket pocket. Tell me everything, she demanded. No more protection through ignorance. Killian finally closed his laptop, studying her face. It's a long story. We have time. He nodded to the pilot, ensuring privacy, then began. 5 years ago, your mother discovered irregularities in Carter Industries accounts. Money laundering, weapons deals, connections to cartels, all hidden beneath legitimate business. My stepfather's work, he was part of it. The Valencia cartel had infiltrated the company years earlier, using it as a front for their operations. Your mother was going to expose everything. Savannah's hands clenched. So they killed her. They tried to make it look like an accident. I was investigating them independently. They'd threatened my sister's tech company. When I connected the dots to your mother's death, I started building a case. But they were always one step ahead. Witnesses disappeared. Evidence vanished. Then I discovered their next move, you. The helicopter hit turbulence, matching Savannah's churning stomach. Why me? Control. Killian's jaw tightened. Your stepfather was embezzling millions. When they caught him, instead of killing him, they offered a deal. You as collateral. I don't understand. Why would they want me? Because you're the sole heir to Carter Industries. With you under their control, they could legitimize their takeover of the company. Your signature on their documents, your face at their meetings, the perfect puppet CEO. Horror crept through Savannah's veins. And my stepfather agreed. He signed the contract that same day. But I'd been monitoring their communications. I outbid them, used shell companies to hide my involvement, bought you before they could. To protect me. Yes. Killian met her eyes. But they never stopped watching, waiting for a chance to take you back. Savannah absorbed this, pieces clicking into place. Reynolds. He works for them. He's their enforcer, specialized in breaking people until they're compliant. When he showed up at the dinner party, you knew they were making their move. The helicopter began its descent toward a private airstrip. Killian's hand found hers, surprising them both. I've spent 5 years gathering evidence against them, building a case strong enough to bring down their entire operation. And now, Now they know you've seen the files. You're a liability they can't ignore. His grip tightened. We need to disappear until I can finish this. The helicopter touched down beside a waiting jet. As they hurried across the tarmac, Savannah caught Killian's arm. Why didn't you tell me any of this before? Would you have believed me? He brushed a strand of hair from her face. You needed to hate me, to fight me. Your defiance kept you safe, kept you from becoming what they wanted. A puppet, a victim. His voice softened. I've watched too many people break under their control. But you never stopped fighting, even against me. They boarded the jet, settling in as it prepared for takeoff. Savannah pulled out the documents she'd stolen, spreading them across the table between them. Show me, she said. Show me everything you've gathered. I want to understand. Killian hesitated, then reached for his briefcase. For the next hour, as they flew west, he laid out 5 years of investigation. Shell companies, offshore accounts, murder disguised as accidents, a web of corruption that had claimed her mother's life. There's more, he said finally. Your mother, she left something behind. Something they never found. Savannah's heart jumped. What? A failsafe. Evidence she gathered, encrypted and hidden. The key died with her, but if we could find it, we could destroy them. Yes. Killian leaned back, watching her process everything. But it's not your fight, Savannah. You can walk away. Once we reach Montana, I can arrange for you to disappear completely. New identity, new life, somewhere they'll never find you. She studied his face. The man who'd bought her freedom with his fortune, protected her with his power, and now offered her escape. The man she'd hated and feared, and, somehow, come to trust. No, she said firmly. I'm not running. Not from them, not from this, and not from you. Something flickered in his eyes. Hope, maybe, or fear. It's dangerous. So is crossing the street. Savannah reached for his hand. They killed my mother. Used my stepfather's greed to try to control me. I want justice. Justice or revenge? Both. She met his gaze steadily. You've protected me long enough, Killian. Now we fight back. Together. He stared at their joined hands, thumb tracing her knuckles. Together, he echoed, like a prayer or a promise. The jet banked west, carrying them towards sanctuary. But as Savannah watched the clouds below, she knew they weren't just running away. They were running towards something, truth, justice, and a future neither of them had imagined possible. The Montana compound sprawled across a remote valley, its modern architecture blending with the rugged landscape. After 2 weeks of relative peace, Savannah had almost begun to believe they were safe. Almost. She sat in Killian's private office, surrounded by screens displaying their investigation's progress. They'd spent days piecing together her mother's trail, searching for the hidden failsafe that could bring down the cartel. Look at this, Savannah called, enlarging an old email chain. 2 days before her death, Mom accessed a private server in Switzerland. Killian leaned over her shoulder, his presence both familiar and distracting. Could be where she stored the evidence. But why Switzerland? She scrolled through the data. Wait, there's a connection to a company called Alpine Securities. Pull up their records. Savannah typed rapidly, but an error message appeared. It's encrypted. High-level security. Let me. Killian reached around her, fingers flying across the keyboard. A new window opened, revealing transaction histories. Something caught Savannah's eye. These payments, they're all from subsidiaries of Dash. She stopped, blood turning to ice. Hawthorne Industries. Killian went very still behind her. That's impossible, Savannah whispered, digging deeper. But more documents appeared. Transfers, contracts, all linking Killian's company to the cartel's operations. Savannah. His voice was careful, controlled. She spun the chair around, facing him. Explain. It's complicated. Uncomplicated. Her hands shook as she pulled up more files. These transfers, they started the day after Mom died. Your company acquired everything. Assets, properties, controlling shares. I can explain. Then do it. She stood, fury building. Was any of it true? The protection? The investigation? Or was I just another acquisition? Killian reached for her, but she backed away. Everything I told you about protecting you was true. But not why. The reality hit her like physical pain. You weren't investigating the cartel. You were working with them. No. He moved forward, trapping her against the desk. Listen to me. Yes, I took advantage of your mother's death. Yes, I used the chaos to build my empire. But I didn't kill her. Just profited from her murder. Savannah laughed bitterly. God, I was so stupid. Trusting you, believing you cared. I do care. His hands gripped her arms. Everything changed when I met you. Why do you think the cartel turned against me? I was supposed to deliver you to them, but I couldn't. Not once I knew you. She shoved him away. Don't try to make this romantic. You're worse than they are. At least they never pretended to be my savior. Savannah, please. Real fear entered his voice. You don't understand how dangerous this is. If they find out you know Dash, they'll what? Kill me like they killed my mother. She grabbed her laptop, backing toward the door. Like you helped them kill her? I didn't know. Killian's composure cracked. I swear, I didn't know they planned to kill her. I was just an opportunist taking advantage of corporate chaos. By the time I learned the truth, it was too late. And what's your excuse for buying me? More opportunism. Pain flashed across his face. At first. But then I saw you. Your strength. Your fire. I couldn't let them destroy that. Everything since then has been real. Real. Savannah's voice broke. You kept me prisoner. Used my mother's murder as an excuse to control me. Made me trust you. Care for you. She stopped, fighting tears. Was anything you told me true? My feelings for you are true. Killian stepped forward, desperation in every line of his body. The cartel, your stepfather, Reynolds, they're still the enemy. Let me help you fight them. Like you helped my mother? Savannah's hand found the door handle. I'd rather take my chances with Reynolds. Don't. Real fear entered his voice. Savannah, if you leave now, Dash. You'll what? Lock me up again. Kill me to protect your secret? She met his eyes one last time. Goodbye, Killian. I hope your empire was worth it. She ran. Through the compound's corridors, past startled security guards, out into the Montana wilderness. Behind her, she heard Killian shouting orders, but she didn't stop. The sun was setting, painting the mountains blood red. Somewhere in the growing darkness, a vehicle started. They would follow her, of course. Killian's protective instincts weren't entirely fake, just founded on lies. But Savannah had learned from her captivity. She'd memorized the compound's layout, the patrol patterns, the blind spots. More importantly, she'd memorized the location of the emergency cache, weapons, money, and supplies hidden for worst-case scenarios. As full dark descended, she retrieved the cache and hotwired one of the maintenance trucks. The compound's lights grew smaller in her rearview mirror as she drove into the night. Her mother's encrypted files were saved on her laptop, along with evidence of Killian's involvement. It wasn't the justice she'd imagined, but it was a start. She would finish what her mother began, expose everyone involved, including the man who'd claimed to love her while building his fortune on her mother's grave. But first, she had to survive. Because Killian was right about one thing, knowledge made her a target. The cartel would come for her. Reynolds would hunt her. And Killian would try to save her, even if it meant destroying her. Because that's what monsters did when they loved something. They crushed it in their attempt to keep it safe. Savannah drove through the night, her heart as dark as the Montana sky. She'd been sold into darkness once before. This time, she chose it willingly, embracing the shadows that would hide her from both enemies and false saviors. Behind her, storm clouds gathered over the mountains. Ahead lay uncertainty, danger, and the bitter taste of betrayal. But she was her mother's daughter, and she would have justice, no matter the cost. 3 days of running had led Savannah to a dingy motel outside Seattle. Rain pelted the windows as she worked through encrypted files, searching for her mother's hidden evidence. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, matching the bruises on her knuckles from fighting off a tail in Portland. A knock at the door made her freeze. She reached for the gun from the emergency cache, moving silently toward the peephole. Room service, a familiar voice called. Marcus Reynolds. Savannah's heart stopped. She glanced at her laptop, still decrypting files. No time to pack. No time to think. The door burst open before she could move. Reynolds entered with 2 armed men, his smile predatory. Did you really think you could hide from us? Worth a try. Savannah backed toward the bathroom, calculating angles, exits, chances. We've been watching you since Montana. Reynolds circled the room, touching her scattered papers. Quite the dramatic exit. Poor Killian. He really thought he could protect you. He was working with you. Reynolds laughed. Is that what you think? Oh, sweetheart. You don't know anything. He nodded to his men, who moved to grab her. Savannah fought. A sharp elbow to a throat, a knee to a groin, but a third man appeared from the bathroom. Pain exploded in her skull. She woke in darkness, wrists bound to a chair. The air smelled of rust and seawater, a warehouse, maybe. Her head throbbed where they'd struck her. Finally awake, Reynolds emerged from the shadows, rolling up his sleeves. Let's talk about your mother's evidence. Go to hell. After you. He backhanded her, the ring on his finger splitting her lip. Where's the failsafe? I don't know. Wrong answer. Reynolds pulled up another chair, sitting uncomfortably close. Your mother hid something before she died. Transaction records, account numbers, names, everything that could expose our operation. Where is it? Savannah spat blood at his feet. If I knew, you'd be in handcuffs. Spirited. Like mother, like daughter. He grabbed her jaw, fingers digging into bone. But your mother broke eventually. So will you. You're lying. You killed her before she could talk. Reynolds smiled, the expression chilling. Is that what Killian told you? That we murdered her to hide our secrets? He released her face, chuckling. Your mother's death was an accident. A tragic, poorly timed accident that spoiled everything. What are you talking about? We weren't trying to kill her. We were negotiating. He lit a cigarette, smoke curling between them. She found our operation, yes? But instead of exposing us, she made a deal. Her silence for a cut of the profits. No. Savannah shook her head. She would never dash. Everyone has a price, sweetheart. Your mother's was power. She wanted control of the company, influence over the cartel's American operations. We were finalizing the arrangement when her car crashed. The world tilted on its axis. You're lying. Am I? Reynolds pulled out his phone, showing her emails, documents, meeting records. Your mother wasn't a saint. She was ambitious, ruthless, willing to partner with criminals to expand her empire. Then why do you need her failsafe? Because it contains proof of her involvement. Evidence that would destroy the company's legitimate holdings. He leaned closer. Evidence Killian Hawthorne has been trying to find for 5 years. Savannah's mind raced. I don't understand. If Killian works for you, Dash. Reynolds laughed. Killian Hawthorne doesn't work for anyone. He's been hunting us since your mother died, using his corporate takeover as cover to infiltrate our operation. Everything he built, every deal he made, it was all to get close enough to destroy us. But the transactions, the contracts, Dash, all part of his long game. He had to make us believe he was corrupt to gain our trust. Reynolds stubbed out his cigarette on her arm, making her gasp. Until he broke pattern to protect you. 5 years of careful planning, ruined by sentiment. The pain in Savannah's chest had nothing to do with her injuries. Why are you telling me this? Because in about an hour, Killian will walk through that door, thinking he's found your location. He'll try to save you, like the noble idiot he's become. Reynolds checked his watch. And you'll watch him die, knowing his love for you led him right into our trap. He won't come. But even as she said it, Savannah knew it was a lie. He's been following your trail since Seattle, always one step behind us. Behind you. Reynolds smiled. Did you really think you escaped his compound on your own? He let you go, knowing you'd lead us to the failsafe. His last chance to complete your mother's mission. Footsteps echoed outside. Reynolds stood, drawing his weapon. Right on schedule. The warehouse door opened. Killian entered slowly, hands raised. His eyes found Savannah's, filled with things unsaid. I have what you want, he said to Reynolds. The failsafe. Your names, your accounts, everything. Let her go, and it's yours. Noble to the end. Reynolds signaled his men. But we both know I can take it from your corpse. You can try. Killian's voice changed, carrying the weight of command. Now, the warehouse exploded into chaos. James and a tactical team burst through windows and doors. Gunfire erupted, bullets sparking off metal. Reynolds grabbed Savannah's chair, pressing his gun to her head. Call them off. But Savannah was already moving. She'd worked her bonds loose during his monologue, waiting for her chance. Now she drove her head back into his face, feeling cartilage crunch. The chair toppled. Reynolds stumbled. Killian's bullet took him in the chest. Then Killian was there, cutting her free, hands checking for injuries. I'm sorry, he breathed. I'm so sorry. Savannah touched his face, seeing the truth at last. You let me believe you were the villain. It was safer. He helped her up as James's team secured the warehouse. If you hated me, they would believe it too. And now, Killian pulled her close, forehead resting against hers. Now we finish what your mother started. Together. If you'll trust me one last time. Savannah looked at Reynolds's body, at the evidence of Killian's long game scattered around them. No more lies. No more lies. He kissed her gently, tasting of blood and promises. Just justice. The Valencia cartel's Manhattan headquarters gleamed in the morning sun, 40 stories of glass and steel hiding corruption at its core. Savannah watched from a secure apartment across the street as Killian prepared for the endgame. The failsafe is inside, he said, adjusting his tactical gear. Your mother hid it in their own building, right under their noses. How do you know? Killian pulled up building schematics on his tablet. Before she died, she left a trail of breadcrumbs. I've spent 5 years following them, waiting for the right moment. And now we have Reynolds's security codes, the cartel's patrol schedules, and proof of their operations. He touched her face gently. It's time to end this. James entered with final reports. The tactical team was in position, FBI contacts were standing by, and every exit was covered. One way or another, it would end today. Their leadership is meeting on the top floor, James reported. Full council in attendance. Perfect. Killian checked his weapons. They think they're gathering to celebrate Reynolds' success. Savannah studied the building plans. There's something wrong. It's too easy. It's supposed to be. Killian's voice hardened. They're expecting me, hoping I'll try something dramatic to save you. But I'm already safe. They don't know that. He shared a look with James. They think Reynolds still has you. That I'll do anything to get you back. Understanding dawned. You're using yourself as bait. The only way to get their entire operation in one place. Killian wouldn't meet her eyes. While they're focused on me, James's team will access the secure server room. No. Savannah grabbed his arm. It's suicide. It's necessary. He finally looked at her, eyes full of everything they'd never said. Your mother died trying to expose them. I won't let her sacrifice be for nothing. And what about your sacrifice? You expect me to just watch you walk into their trap? Killian pulled her close, his kiss fierce and desperate. I expect you to finish what we started. The evidence, the contacts, everything you need to destroy them. It'll be yours. I don't want evidence. Savannah's fingers dug into his arms. I want you alive. Savannah dash. No. She stepped back, jaw set. You don't get to play martyr. Not after everything. There has to be another way. James cleared his throat. She's right, sir. We can find Dash. We don't have time. Killian checked his watch. The council meeting starts in 30 minutes. This is our only shot. Savannah's mind raced. 5 years of investigation. Her mother's hidden failsafe. The cartel's security. Wait. The server room, she said suddenly. What if we don't need it? Killian frowned. The evidence, Dash. Think about it. Mom knew they'd kill her if she threatened them directly. So she hid the failsafe somewhere they'd never look. Savannah pulled up the building plans. Not in their servers. In their artwork. What? The Valencia family's pride and joy, their private collection. Paintings worth millions, displayed in their council room. She pointed to the blueprints. Mom was an art collector too. She knew their habits. Understanding lit Killian's face. The new acquisition. The one they're unveiling today. A gift from an anonymous donor. Savannah smiled grimly. Arranged 5 years ago, scheduled for delivery after her death. Clever woman. Killian studied the plans with new eyes. But the council room will be heavily guarded. Not if they're distracted by a ghost. Savannah met his gaze steadily. My mother's ghost. The plan came together quickly. While Killian created a diversion in the lobby, Savannah would access the council room through maintenance tunnels. James's team would provide backup and coordinate with FBI units waiting nearby. It's still dangerous, Killian argued as they prepared. If they catch you, Dash, then you'll save me. Savannah checked her equipment. Like you always do. He caught her arm, pulling her close. I can't lose you. You won't. She kissed him softly. But you have to trust me. Like I trusted you. Even when I thought you were the enemy. The operation began at sunrise. Killian entered through the main doors, his presence triggering alarms throughout the building. Security forces converged on the lobby, exactly as planned. Savannah moved through maintenance corridors, James's voice guiding her through an earpiece. The council room was empty, all members drawn to the drama unfolding below. The painting hung prominently, still wrapped in protective covering. As Savannah approached, she noticed subtle markings on the frame, her mother's signature symbols. I'm in position, She whispered into her comm, ready for phase 2. Below, Killian's voice echoed through security channels. He was demanding answers, threatening exposure, playing the desperate man perfectly. The cartel's leaders would be arriving soon, eager to witness his downfall. Savannah worked quickly, removing the painting's backing. There, embedded in the frame, she found a small drive and a handwritten note. "For my daughter, the truth will set us free." Footsteps approached the council room. Savannah replaced the backing and melted into shadows as cartel leaders entered, their attention focused on screens showing Killian's standoff below. "Bring him up," someone ordered. "Let him face justice before the council." Minutes later, Killian was escorted in, battered but unbowed. His eyes swept the room, finding Savannah's hiding spot instantly. "Looking for someone?" The cartel's leader smiled coldly. "Perhaps your precious Savannah? She's safe from you." Killian's voice carried pure conviction. "That's all that matters." "Safe? No one is safe from us. Your little crusade ends today, Mr. Hawthorne." "Does it?" Killian smiled, blood staining his teeth. "Check your phones." The room erupted with alerts. Every screen displayed the same message, evidence streaming to law enforcement agencies worldwide. Account numbers, transactions, names, everything. "Impossible," someone breathed. "The servers dash. We're a decoy." Savannah stepped into the light, holding her mother's drive. "You were so busy watching your digital fortress, you never checked your walls." Chaos erupted. Guards reached for weapons, but FBI teams were already breaching the floor. Killian moved with lethal grace, disarming the nearest threat while James's unit secured the room. When it ended, the cartel's leadership was in custody, their empire crumbling. Savannah found Killian standing at the windows, watching dawn break over Manhattan. "Your mother would be proud," he said softly. Savannah took his hand, feeling the tremors of adrenaline fade. "She'd be proud of both of us." They had won. Justice, revenge, truth, all the things they'd fought for. But as Killian pulled her close, Savannah realized the greatest victory wasn't the cartel's downfall. It was finding someone worth fighting beside. 1 month after the cartel's fall, Savannah stood in her mother's restored office at Carter Industries. The company was hers now, cleansed of corruption and rebuilt from the ground up. The view of New York hadn't changed, but everything else had. Her phone buzzed, another news alert about the Valencia case. 37 convictions so far, with more pending. Her mother's evidence had exposed corruption across 3 continents, toppling empires built on blood money. The door opened. Killian entered, looking strange in casual clothes instead of his usual suits. "The board meeting's ready. Let them wait." Savannah touched the framed photo on her desk, her mother smiling at a charity gala, taken weeks before her death. "I've been thinking about Montana." "Having regrets?" "The opposite." She turned to face him. "I was so angry, so sure you were the villain. But you let me hate you to keep me safe." Killian moved closer, his presence familiar now rather than threatening. "I never deserved your trust back then, but you earned it." She touched the scar on his shoulder, a souvenir from their final battle. "Every secret, every lie, it was all to protect me." "Not all of it." His hand covered hers. "Some things were purely selfish." "Like what?" "Like falling in love with my prisoner." His voice carried old pain. "I told myself it was duty, obligation to your mother's memory. But watching you fight, seeing your strength, I was lost long before I admitted it." Savannah remembered their first kiss, born of fury and desperation. "When did you know?" "The night you tried to escape. Standing in the rain, watching you defy me, I knew I'd never cage you again." His thumb traced her pulse point, an echo of old possession transformed into tenderness. "You deserved freedom. Freedom isn't about being alone." She stepped into his space, feeling his breath catch. "It's about choosing who to stand beside." Their dynamic had shifted since the cartel's fall. No more games of power and control, no more secrets kept in the name of protection. They were equals now, partners in both business and life. "The media's still watching," Killian murmured, though his hands settled on her waist. "Waiting for the scandal. The captive who fell for her captor. Let them watch." Savannah wound her arms around his neck. "We've survived worse than gossip." He smiled, the expression softening his face. "You've changed me, you know. The man who bought you would never recognize who I've become." "Good." He was kind of an ass. Killian laughed, the sound still rare enough to treasure. but his eyes turned serious. I don't deserve this. You. After everything I did. Stop. Savannah pressed her fingers to his lips. We've both done things we regret. But every choice, every lie, every fight, it led us here. I wouldn't change that. Even the part where I kept you prisoner. Even that. She smiled. Though your security could use work. I escaped twice. I let you escape. His hands tightened possessively. Both times. Keep telling yourself that. The banter felt natural now, their dark beginning transformed into something they could almost joke about. Almost. Marry me, Killian said suddenly. Savannah blinked. What? Marry me. His voice carried absolute certainty. Not because of duty or protection or making things right. Marry me because I love you, and I want to spend my life proving I deserve you. That's quite a proposal from someone who once bought me. I'm trying to be romantic here. By reminding me you purchased me like property? Killian growled, lifting her onto the desk. You're impossible. You love it. Savannah pulled him closer, smiling against his lips. And yes, I'll marry you. She kissed him deeply, feeling his control shatter. But I'm keeping my company. I wouldn't dare try to take it. His hands tangled in her hair. You're a better CEO than I ever was. Damn right. The board could definitely wait, Savannah decided as Killian's kisses turned heated. They had earned this moment, this victory over darkness, this transformation of possession into partnership. Later, watching the sun set over Manhattan, Savannah thought about endings and beginnings. Her mother's justice was complete, her legacy secured. The nightmares that had haunted them both were finally laid to rest. But the greatest gift wasn't the victory or the vindication. It was finding love in the darkest place, a love strong enough to survive lies, strong enough to overcome betrayal, strong enough to transform enemies into soulmates. What are you thinking about? Killian asked, joining her at the window. Savannah leaned back against his chest, feeling his arms wrap around her waist. How different everything could have been if you just asked me to dinner like a normal person. He laughed, the sound vibrating through her. Would you have said yes? Probably not. You were pretty intimidating. Were. Still are. She turned in his arms. But now I know it's all an act. His eyes darkened. Not all of it. Prove it. As Killian pulled her into another kiss, Savannah smiled against his lips. They had started as captor and prisoner, evolved into allies, and emerged as equals. Their love story wasn't conventional, but it was theirs, forged in darkness, tested by fire, and ultimately unbreakable. The end wasn't perfect. There were still nightmares, still moments when old fears surfaced. But they faced them together, stronger for every battle they'd fought, every lie they'd overcome, every truth they'd discovered. And in the end, that was better than perfect. It was real.